Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Christmas is officially here. How do I know this? I've just watched Hans Gruber fall off Nakatomi Plaza. And for those that are about to rock, I salute you, my friends. The closest I've ever got to a full-on rock star on this show was when I spoke to Jerry Harrison from the Talking Heads a few years ago. However, today I have David Frangioni from Audio One on the show, who has to be one of the coolest guys I've spoken with, and again has a fantastic and inspirational story to share with us. Check this out. David was the in-house engineer for 5 of Aerosmith's records and built most of their recording studios and high-end AV systems. And David also gained notoriety as the official technologist for the Osbournes and appeared in multiple episodes of their hit MTV show. And Ozzy Osbourne himself even jokingly referred to him as the Rocket Man. He's only happy when he has a fuse box in his hands. But he was also a drummer since the age of 2 and is the recipient of dozens of gold and platinum albums as technical consultant, engineer and programmer for his work with the likes of the Rolling Stones, Ringo Starr, Elton John, Sting, Bryan Adams, Journey, Styx, Shakira, Ozzy Osbourne, Cher, and I could go on and on. But today we're going to be talking about the high-end home tech systems and how sound media can truly create a luxury home experience, all washed down with a few rock and roll stories. How does that sound? Grab your glass of Jack Daniels, buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Miami so we can speak with David from Audio One. So a massive warm welcome to the show, David. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm David Frangioni. It's great to be here. You know, I'm a music technologist. I'm an entrepreneur, businessman, engineer, producer, drummer, author, drum library creator, artist development professional. Very blessed to have worn a lot of hats and enjoy all that I do, and just love the whole combination.
Man, I thought I spun a lot of plates. You put me to shame there, David.
Life's too short for me not to keep really busy doing things that I'm passionate about and that I think I can contribute to. And it's just been a wild ride.
Just for anyone tuning in and hearing you for the first time, just to bring them up to speed, you've been the in-house engineer for 5 of Aerosmith records and built most of their recording studios and high-end AV systems. But you also gained notoriety as the official technologist for the Osbournes and even appeared on multiple episodes of their hit MTV show. And I believe Ozzy Osbourne even jokingly referred to you as the Rocket Man. So can you tell me more about your backstory as a drummer and also your work, which has been with everyone from the Stones, Ringo Starr, Elton John, Sting, Bryan Adams, Shakira, Cher, and so many more. It's, like you said, it's been a hell of a ride.
It started with, at age 2, I started playing the drums, and my parents got me a little toy drum kit and somehow realized that I had an affinity for the drums. And at the same time, I was diagnosed with retinoblastoma, which is cancer of the eye. And what that turned out to be is that to remove the cancer, they had to remove my right eye. So I became blind in my right eye since the age of 2. And it really had a profound effect on my life and my family's life beyond the near-death experience and the loss of sight. I had a prosthetic, and it really kind of looked different than other kids. So I had a pretty isolated, kind of rough childhood, and music ended up being my refuge. I also became kind of a collector. I started collecting baseball cards and G.I. Joes and immersed myself in my own world, really. And by the time I was 8, I was taking drum lessons. By the time I was 12, I was playing in bands. I started taking lessons with some really amazing drum teachers and drummers, Alan Dawson, Joe Morello, Rod Morgenstein, Les DeMerle, just world-class drummers. And because my parents were always very intent on making sure that anything that you did, you took a very educated and learned approach and learned it, quote unquote, right. So I was taking lessons from a young age and then kind of evolved to these amazing teachers. And in my pursuit of wanting to be the world's greatest drummer at age around 16, I found technology for the drums, because now we're in the mid 80s and technology starting to happen. And the drums, in order to be a modern day drummer at that time, you had to know something about drum machines and electronic drums, which I didn't know anything about. And I was pretty adverse to even wanting to know about. But I'll never forget, I saw Dave Weckl play a solo where he went from playing this incredible acoustic drum solo to pressing a button, and he was playing a percussion ensemble on the same drum set. And of course, he was triggering these sounds, and that just opened my mind to a whole nother universe. Well, what happened in my case is I went to learn about technology to apply it to the drums, and ended up completely unexpectedly falling in love with technology, having an ability with it that was very natural. And I ended up loving it as much or more than playing the drums. And I was in technology at a very early stage in the whole evolution of music technology. There really weren't any home studios at this time. They were pretty much just rigs that artists used, and MIDI, M-I-D-I, musical instrument digital interface, the protocol for how all these different synthesizers and sequencers and whatnot communicated, was something that I was just fascinated with. So I immersed myself in it to the point where within a couple of years of really studying hard and learning, going to studios, putting myself in the middle of myriad situations to learn, I was consulting and had my own MIDI consulting business, and was helping a lot of different people in Boston, where I'm from, in New England, that area, learn about MIDI. And I had an 800 number, 1-800-345-MIDI. And I just was building up my career, where I really said to myself, my heart is in music and technology, and wouldn't it be amazing if I could take all the things that I love here and have a career out of it? I never dreamt and thought that I would end up working with so many of my heroes, but because I was, I had a pretty complete understanding of all the different types of music technology and centered around MIDI, and I was early in the life cycle of this technology, I was able to go out and work really hard and network and get clients. And so, I worked with the Boston Symphony, because I could read music and I had technology as well. I remember I got into New England Conservatory on a scholarship and went there for a couple of years, and left when I had the project with Aerosmith come around, because I really had to choose one or the other, and I chose Aerosmith. And I remember there was a really unique gig where the symphony needed someone who had an Akai sampler who could sample all of these sounds and play them back with the symphony. Sir Michael Tippett had this piece that had all these different sound effects that were part of the orchestra. And so somebody had to be able to read music, play with the symphony, create, get the sounds that were needed, put them into the Akai, play them back. It was like 4 different people's worth of, of ability. But because I had played in the Greater Boston Youth Symphony Orchestra in the percussion department, and because I could read and I could sample, and I had my own Akai sampler, it was crazy. Like, I had the gig with the symphony. So there was I was out there doing anything and everything to learn and to progress. And then I had, I got the call from Aerosmith to work with, at first, Tom Hamilton, the bass player. He had a little MIDI rig that I helped him with, and then that evolved to the rest of the band. And then I ended up, just working with them day to day for years, doing all the technology and kind of being the one-man show. And And then I just built it up from there. And then as my career evolved, doing, a project at a time, I was getting a lot of calls to help people put their entire studios together. And I realized I've always loved business. And I realized that I needed to evolve beyond just one person doing projects and being work for hire for each artist. So I started a company called Audio One, and that originally that company was built up to provide recording studio installations and servicing, mostly to artists, mostly home studios. Some people even claimed at the time I built the first home studio and kind of was at the cutting edge of that, back with EQ magazine and the early days of home studios and technology. And then that evolved, Audio One evolved to home theaters and home automation, because building a recording studio for an artist was one thing, but a lot of them also had pretty tricked out homes, and they wanted to do things either for entertainment sake or for ease of use, like a lighting system, or they had security needs. So I loved and love all of this technology. So I understood how it all worked, and I built Audio One up from there, and just kept building my career. Doing drum sample libraries. Again, the early days, at the time they were on CD, then that evolved to CD-ROM, then that evolved to download, of course. Authoring books, building up Pro Tools training. I was the first guy to have ProToolsTraining.com and kind of build up the whole idea of having a certified Pro Tools education, which I saw in the IT world being done by like Microsoft and Adobe, but nobody was doing it in the pro world. So I thought, this is really needed. And I built up a business called Pro Media Training. And then I got really into artist development, because the more I worked with all these great artists and the more I learned about how careers are built and how to kind of put it all together from the inside, I loved it. And I loved working with new artists and helping them, achieve their dreams. So here we are today. I'm a published author of 3 books, the founder of Audio One, the founder of Pro Media, and the founder of IDA, Inspire and Develop Artists.
Wow, what an inspirational story. It really is. And a phrase you used a moment ago there, of course, was ease of use. And on this podcast, I try to share stories about how technology is transforming multiple industries, but in a language that everyone can understand. So I've got to ask, was it always important to create a world-class audio technology solution, but also made it easy for your clients and easy for them to use? And if that was important to you, why was that?
Yes, it was always important, but the understanding of how important it was evolved because I'm a technologist and an end user myself. When I first, early days, right, in the 80s, when I first started putting systems together for clients, I wanted them to be easy to use, but I also was looking at the installations from my view, which was too advanced of a view. And I kind of missed the boat early on with some of my clients, and they corrected me and they said, David, I remember when I did this touchscreen remote control for Steven Tyler's family room, and it was the very early days of this technology. It was, just like the handheld touchscreen. It was wireless, battery operated, used like 6D batteries. And it was like carrying a thesaurus around, but this was supposed to be like smart home, cutting edge, but in 1990 or whatever it was. But that said, it was a touchscreen, and it was capable of, you pushed a button and your system, which would consist of, say, a preamp and an amplifier and a TV and some sources, it would all be configured by the push of a button. So if you wanted to watch a DVD, or at that time there wasn't DVD, but let's say you wanted to watch a VHS or a Laserdisc, you'd press the corresponding button and all of the routing behind the scenes, the TV input, the amplifier input, the preamp input, the surround mode, all of that would change. By today's standards, extremely simple. But back then it was really cool. And Steven loved the fact that, his family could come in and use all of these different things in his family room to be entertained and not have it be so complicated, because the alternative was, 4 or 5 remotes and trying to remember how things were routed and which one to pick up for volume and which one for channel, etc. So I program it, and he calls me up and he says, "How do I change?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "David, I got the system and I'm trying it here," but he said, "How do I change surround modes? Like I want to hear the stereo. Sometimes I want to hear what I'm listening to in proper stereo like it was recorded, but sometimes I want to hear synthesized stereo, and I want to hear the sound in all the speakers, because it was a surround system that we put this in." And I said, "Will you press the Citation 7 button?" And he said, "What the hell is a Citation 7? And I said, "That's the surround processor." And he goes, Whoa. He said, "David, when I want to put my clothes in the dryer, I don't look for the Maytag 72-E11. I look for the dryer. So why in the world wouldn't you put surround modes on the button?" And I said, "You're right. That's exactly what I should have put on it." And like that one experience changed my entire approach for the rest of my life. And I learned so many things from that one little silly family room system, because Steven is so intense about everything being great and like take it as far as you can. And it's one of the reasons that I was able to progress in my career as rapidly as I did, because working with him, he pushes you to the limit and then some. So here was this simple television surround system with a bunch of sources and et cetera. And it turned into this incredible learning experience, because by the time I finished programming it, a dog could put his paw on the touch panel and watch TV. And it wasn't anywhere close to that when I originally finished, but yet I thought it was. So I took my whole understanding of what someone who doesn't understand technology but knows exactly what they want to do with it, I took that to another level and then just kept evolving it.
Now, your systems can cost anything from a minimum of $50,000 to several million. So can you help people listening understand the kind of clients that you've got there? I mean, are they all artists, and the kind of projects that you're working on right now?
Well, no, they're not all artists, but they all have what I would call high-end needs.
Yeah.
As you know, Neil, the technology is so vast. Maybe some people can be all things to all people, but I've really focused on high-level work. It's the most challenging and the most interesting to me, and it's what I enjoy the most and have spent my career doing. So that's the sector that I get hired in, because that's my specialty. So that's why the cost of the systems are what they are, because the needs and the scope of what the systems do fall into that, into that range. Maybe it's a very high level security system that I'm doing for someone, where they have access control and they have cameras everywhere, and they have the same level of monitoring you'd get if you had a dedicated security guard on your property, but they don't. They have a system, but it alerts them and protects them, and it just as similar to having a full-time guard. Some clients have a full-time guard, but the guard still needs a system to monitor, etc. Sometimes it's lighting control. Sometimes it's a full-blown recording studio. Sometimes it's an entire smart home automation system. Sometimes it's just a home theater. And in fact, I worked with IMAX for several years, and now I can install an IMAX theater in someone's home using their IMAX private theater technology, which I actually helped develop. So there's so many different areas of technology that I work in, and it's, but the price points tend to be in the range you described, because that's what the needs of my clients are.
And you mentioned a few moments ago the Steven Tyler story in his family room there. That's a great example of where that technology was beginning. But when it comes to high-end home tech systems, can you also help listeners visualise how sound media can genuinely create that luxury home experience that a lot of people dream about?
Well, absolutely. And there's two general parts to it to really get it right. There's the sonic outcome of the system and what it delivers and the result that you get, which is basically what you just said, where someone has a dream system to listen to music, either in a dedicated room or distributed audio throughout their home, inside, outside of their home, on their yacht, wherever. But the second part of it that's just as important is the aesthetic. And for many years, if you wanted great sound, you had to live with an aesthetic that wasn't necessarily so great. And that stopped a lot of people who had the means and had the vision and had the interest and the passion for music and sound and wanted a system, but it stopped them from doing it because it would just have too much of an impact on their home in a negative way, visually and aesthetically. So it's both components. It's getting the aesthetic right and it's getting the sonic right. And that really is its own art form. Took me a long time. I was very blessed. It took me a long time to get the sonic down to the point where I could really consistently understand the environments that I was called into putting sound into and really get it right in that regard. And at the time, aesthetics were kind of a secondary piece to the puzzle in the 80s and some of the 90s because there just weren't options available that you could even, utilize. So you just kind of had a limited palette, and most of it was focused on the sonic results. So now it's a whole nother universe, and that whole field has evolved to the point where if you know what you're doing, you can get incredible results sonically and visually. And in some cases, we do systems where you walk around someone's home, you don't even notice the speakers anywhere. They're so aesthetically well done. And then when you turn on the sound, you're blown away and you're almost like, where is that coming from? And, or how is it achieved? And, that's part of the art of it. It's an interesting thing because you see speakers at Home Depot, and it always, before I had a name and a career that was established, people would say, oh, well, what's the big deal? You just put speakers up. And it's kind of like, well, if you saw paint at at an arts and crafts store, do you just think that, you're Picasso because you see paint there? It's the same thing. Just because you see speakers at Home Depot or at Best Buy, that has nothing to do with the art form of really taking it to the highest level. And that's where I enjoy doing installations and working with clients, people who are passionate about what's possible and what the capabilities are of these systems. And, that's what I work on.
And outside of that, when I was researching Audio One, I came across South Florida's smartest smart home. It's valued at an incredible $35 million. And I'll post a video on the show, on the blog post that will accompany this episode, so listeners can see it and understand what I'm talking about. But can you tell me more about that project and all the technology that you installed?
Well, it's a complete smart home. What I would consider an A to Z smart home, where you have all the different aspects of what can be reliably controlled at a high level in a large estate. And it's not only being able to control all these different things. So, in other words, the front gate, the pool temperature, all the motorized window treatments, all of the lighting zones, the audio, the video, the temperature throughout the home, which might have, 15 thermostats. It's not just all of those different things being controllable. What really makes it smart, in my vision of a smart home, is that it's all unified onto a single interface that makes accessing any of these different parts of the home extremely fast and easy and logical. And when you look at a $35 million home with incredible capabilities from a smart home, you go back to the Steven Tyler story on, how do you make something so easy that is really complicated. It's complicated at the core, and it's complicated to make it easy, because just the sheer number of items that you're controlling, you can, if you're not clever and experienced in how to put it all together, then you find that, okay, well, if we have one interface and you got 400 zones of lights, and you have 30 window treatments that can go up and down, putting them all on one interface sounds great, except it's like it's going to turn into a crossword puzzle, which isn't so easy and doesn't really accomplish much. So really what's the trick is being able to take all these different technologies, put them in one interface, but present them in a manner that really makes it easy and makes it so that you're not even thinking about the technology. It's kind of the opposite of what most people think about when they think of technology. They think, robots and artificial intelligence and, geeky, techie. But really, these interfaces have to be the simplistic equivalent of a light switch, but yet you're doing so many things behind the scenes. And that's what we did at that house, is that we were able to, put a unified interface with people living there that are not techie, but they've said to me, we couldn't use this house without what you did. It would just be so cumbersome and so aggravating that it would change how we live there. We actually wouldn't even want to deal with, opening and closing the shades and drapes and listening to music and doing different things that in this home are extremely easy and fast to do. But without a system like the one we're talking about, it wouldn't be. So that's really, that was really the crowning achievement there. And it's nice to be recognized for the work that you do. Every project takes so much time and effort. Even if you've done it a lot in the past and you've built up processes and you have a lot of experience doing it, it's still no different than, if you watch Tom Brady play quarterback for the Patriots, it's like he still has to go out every game and achieve. You still have to be ready to go and be at the highest level. Your past is an indication of what you're capable of, but it doesn't do much more than that each day. You still got to go out and earn it. And so, it was great that house has gotten a lot of recognition and people appreciate what we were able to accomplish.
Absolutely. And you've worked with everyone from rock stars, celebrities, to huge companies such as IMAX. But I've got to ask, who has been your favourite client to work with and why?
It's hard to pick one. Yeah. I have so many great memories. Of course, all the years with Aerosmith have so many great memories. Ozzy and Sharon and Jack and Kelly were so amazing, such warm, nice people, very just great to work with, very appreciative of all the hard work that I did for them and the results that I got. And of course, at the time they were filming the show, which I was a fan of, so to end up, being a part of it in some small way was just so much fun. So I think those are two artists that I have a lot of colorful memories and a lot of moments that, you can't ever, duplicate. Yeah. But, it's hard to just pick one, you can't really pick one client because there's just been so many, great ones and so many great memories and they all form your life. You add it all up to all the different clients and experiences and moments and then that's the life that you've lived. And I just take every day. And I think it comes from having the cancer as a kid and going through that as a child. I just take every day and just look at it like, this could be the last day ever. And there's so much that I have on my plate for today and so many things that I want to accomplish. And I just put my head down and go. And that to me is fun, even though it's disciplined hard work and it's, and it's not easy oftentimes, but it's fun.
And you really are involved in some fantastic projects too. Can you also tell me a little bit more about your work with IDA? Because I think that is an incredibly cool project I really wanted to highlight today.
Well, thank you. It's the natural progression of how my life's gone. 20 years ago, I was just learning and growing and working with a lot of great artists and seeing a lot, but not really being enlightened, so to speak. And as the years went on, and as you grow, and as you try to improve as a person, you start to learn a lot about life that is, bigger than just you or bigger than just your career. And IDA, Inspire and Develop Artists, was kind of born from the Pro Tools training, which was training very specific to learning a piece of software called Pro Tools and being an expert in that. And taking that same approach of like, okay, education is powerful. People need this information. They need this training and insight. And I really enjoy sharing that with them and developing it. Let's take it to another level with artist development. And it's really like people describe it as Tony Robbins meets American Idol, because there's a very big self-help component to IDA. The inspire part has to do with, inspiring artists to really dig deep and do their best and grow as people and as artists, as writers, as performers. And it's not just what you see on the stage, it's the person themselves. It's what's going on in their head and their heart. There's a lot of personal development that's required to really get where artists ultimately want to go when they want to be successful and they want their art shared with the world. And the bigger stage, that they want to be on, the bigger of a person that they really need to be inside. So IDA focuses on that, as well as all of the tools and fundamentals that it takes to be a great artist. You obviously have to sing great, you have to perform great, you have to have, whatever your unique personality is, you have to be able to share that and have people really, connect to it. And then of course there's all the marketing elements and the song production and writing elements and how to put a full scale career together, from start to finish, starting with an artist that, just has a dream and a vision. And the people that we help at IDA is, a wide range. It could be artists that are brand new and haven't been singing very long, but are really passionate and really have it in their heart that they want to go somewhere. Or it could be an artist that's, halfway there and they just need to take it to the next level and they need to kind of figure out, what do I do next? How do I, put the building blocks together? The music business is, fairly complex and, you need to understand the business and have a team that can, work for you and help you to be successful. And that's what IDA does, all access IDA.
So for anyone listening that would love to stay up to speed with all the work that you're doing there, whether it be your work at Audio One or indeed inspiring developing artists, can you just point the listeners in the direction of your website and how they can contact you?
Sure. Well, my socials are David Frangioni, all one word, and people always get my name wrong, so I'll spell it DavidFrangioni. And, of course, Audio One is audio-one.com and frangionemedia.com and allaccessida.com. So these are all places where you can find more about me.
Well, I'll add all those to the show notes just so people listening can find you nice and easily. But before I do let you go, as someone that has worked with legends such as Steve Tyler and Ozzy Osbourne, do you have your own Ozzy story, or indeed any rock and roll story you can leave us with today? Lots
and lots of great rock and roll stories. Thank God. Let's see. Let me pick one that I can share that would be that a lot of people I think would enjoy. I remember when we first tested out the studio for Ozzy. I built 2 studios for him because the first one we built, which was in Beverly Hills where they filmed the show, and then they moved a few years later and we did a whole nother brand new studio at their new home, which was in Hidden Hills, both in LA, of course. And but when we did the first one, the show was, in full steam, and everything we did was being videoed. And I remember Ozzy used to love the headphone volume so loud that I custom built a headphone system for Ozzy, using amplifiers that would normally be used not to power headphones, but to power large speakers. And I modified these amplifiers for, really ear-splitting level. And when we were first putting the studio together, before I wired the whole studio based on this particular headphone system I designed, I wanted to make sure Ozzy liked it. So I went out. He was on Ozfest at the time. So I went out to one of the shows, went to his hotel room on a day off, and set up a little headphone system based around all of this, like just a single user, of course, just so he could hear it, be exactly what he was going to get in his studio if he liked it. But just at the Four Seasons in his room. So I bring a source. I brought like a CD or something to play at the time. This is like 2003, 2004. And I put the headphones on him, and there's a little group of us, and I put the volume up to the volume went at ear splitting level. The volume went from off would have been like 6 o'clock, and then you turned it clockwise, and by 12 o'clock, everybody in the room could hear what he was listening to on his headphones, right? And then by like 5 o'clock, the headphones would probably start melting. And so Ozzy, I'm slowly raising the volume, and he hears it. And we get to about 11 o'clock, and everybody in the room can hear what he's hearing. And I know that by the time we get to noon on this dial, it's just gonna, there's no way he's gonna want to hear it any louder, right? And so as I'm moving the dial from 6 to 7 to 8, and I'm slowly turning it, he's got his thumbs up, giving me like raise the volume sign, right? And it turns into almost a joke, because everybody in the room are like slapping their knee and holding their ears and pulling their hair out of their head, because he just keeps on giving me the sign. And by the time I'm at 1 o'clock on the dial, I'm starting to now think about, there's no way, I've tested it, but there's no way he can sustain this much longer. And now I'm starting to worry about like the electronics, like, are we going to, like, what's going to give first, right? But his ears being my most, my biggest concern, of course. And he gives me the thumbs up again. And so anyway, he takes it almost to 5 o'clock. The entire Four Seasons hallway at this point, never mind the suite we were in, could hear everything he was hearing by the time I got to 5 o'clock through headphones only, with them on his ears. He, takes the headphones off. I stop the CD, and he goes, "That's great." And that was it. So like, mission accomplished with the headphones. So we fast forward to finishing the studio, and MTV's recording everything, and they want to do this little bit with me where they say, just how loud does Ozzy like it? And I put this little graphic up on the computer monitor, and it's like, we get to like a jet engines at 130 dB, and the threshold of pain is 138, like whatever the numbers that we had were, and like we're building it up to the point where we're gonna start quoting what the atomic bomb sound levels were, and then we get to where Ozzy's headphone level was, and it was like this little gaff that we did on MTV, and then we do the first test session, and Ozzy has some studio musicians come in, and we did Paranoid, right? So it was purely 100% just to test everything out, because we had a drum room in the studio. Of course, we had the vocal booth, we had mixing room, we had, we could do an entire live band recording, as well as all the other things that he would need to do, from mixing, editing, etc. So we wanted to kind of go to the furthest, like, let's test it with all cylinders firing. So we bring in a studio musician drummer and a studio musician guitarist and a studio musician bass player, and then we have Ozzy, of course, and I'm there with Mark Hudson and Bruce Sugar and a whole bunch of people, and we record Paranoid as our test, and MTV's filming everything. So we fast forward a few months. Studio worked great. Ozzy was really, really happy. It was a real success. I was praying to God the whole time, let me not be the butt of the joke here, because if something goes drastically wrong with this studio that I just built for Ozzy, it'll make for great television, but it will make for a horrible studio builder's resume. So I was hoping I wouldn't be the butt of the joke. So fortunately, it went smooth, and it ended up in that particular episode being like that segment was like a real positive, like Ozzy's happy and he's got a new toy and, et cetera, et cetera. It was just a really positive thing. So what MTV did, they would bring the show to Sharon and Ozzy that they would edit, and Sharon and Ozzy would approve it and see it, and before it would go to air, of course, right? Now, I didn't know that ahead of time, but now that I was kind of in the inner circle, I saw how the process works. So it turns out I was there one time, and they brought a cut of a show, and it was the show that had the studio guys. And I'm thinking, I'm watching it, and I'm thinking, oh, this is really cool. And they were very gracious. Sharon and Ozzy said, oh, yes, watch this. Just sit with us. And let's all watch it together. So we watched the show, and we finish, and I'm thinking to myself, this was a really cool show. This is great. And the whole show wasn't just the studio, but the studio part of it was really cool. And Ozzy says, wait a second, babe. My band looks like it's from 2000 BC. And he starts cutting all these jokes about the band because they're studio guys. They're not rock stars. They're studio, right? So they're all they haven't, they're not dressed up and their hair's not done. And, it's and Ozzy's perspective was so funny. He looked at it, he's like, we can't put these guys on TV. And he saw it from such a rock star's, it was such a smart view. He's Ozzy Osbourne. He's a bona fide rock god. He's a legend. He's a great looking guy. And he's been in legendary bands, either Black Sabbath or his own Ozzy Osbourne career. And everybody's cool. And these guys were cool, but they didn't look cool because they were there. They probably weren't even aware they were going to be filmed that day until they had to sign the release. So they're not dressed up. They're wearing old T-shirts and, But Ozzy, it was so funny to hear Ozzy, he kind of turned it into this Jurassic Park parody about the guys. And he's like, no, we can't show that. So they recut the episode and you don't see, really who's recording and kind of how disheveled, some of the guys look. And that was because of Ozzy. And so he was really insightful. And he's such a wonderful guy with such a big heart that it was just a really funny moment to him, for him to say, hey, this is what I think makes sense as an artist and as a rock star, but from a very humble, beautiful view, not in any way haughty or judgmental. Just what he looked and he thought it was really funny, but he didn't think that type of funny was the best way to be funny. So they recut the episode, and it was still really funny, but without the scraggly-looking studio guys. And it was just a funny moment. So some of these things you remember that you just happen to be at that time in that place, and you got a glimpse of history that's really cool to live through. And I feel really fortunate that I've had a lot of them.
What an incredibly cool story. And by the sounds of it, all your gear seems to go way beyond 11 as well, doesn't it?
Well, sometimes, if that's what the client needs it to do, then yeah, we spinal tap it.
Well, I've loved learning about your AV company, Audio One, and indeed your artist development work. And man, one day we need to have a beer, and I think I could just listen to you share these rock and roll stories all night. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to come and speak with me today. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Neil. It's an honor to be on your show and to speak with you and your listeners. And I always say every time that I'm doing an interview or talking to a group, I always say, I hope that people can walk away and at least learn one thing from the time. So hopefully, at the very least, there's some cool stories, and at the most, people will take away, some ideas that have to do with technology of how it can enhance their life.
Oh man, what a cool guy. I am often asked which of my guests I would like to spend a few hours with. And man, I could spend hours just chatting to the breeze, listening to David's rock and roll stories, while tuning up one of his sound systems up to 11 and sipping out a glass of bourbon. But despite working with some of the biggest names in rock and extremely high-profile clients, I love how down-to-earth David is. And like I keep telling people, it's nice to be important, but it's so much more important to be nice. And so much of his story resonated with me. I'm not sure how many people know this, but I did lose my daughter to a horrible disease called neuroblastoma. I did get to know a few kids that were battling with retinoblastoma with my time in hospital with her. And that is one of the reasons, if I'm honest, I keep myself so busy now. And it's interesting how cancer can affect a child that's battling the disease and also a parent in the same way. And by that I mean how it's always sitting on your shoulder. And it makes you just want to make the most of every last moment you have on this planet. So I raise my glass of bourbon to you, David, and thank you for coming on the show today. But over to you guys and dolls listening. Email me anything at all, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, and visit my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. I'd love to hear your personal stories, your insights, your expertise on anything at all. And for me, David's conversation today was a timely reminder of just how important life is and making the most of your time here and spending time with family on this run-up to the holiday season. And because he's got me in a sentimental kind of mood, I'm going to try and watch a Christmas movie every day, as I've said. And today, I'm going to go with the Kurt Russell cheesy Christmas flick, which has just landed on Netflix. I'll let you know how that goes tomorrow, but I'm afraid that's it. We're out of time today. But have no fear, I will return tomorrow with another great guest. So thanks for listening as always. Keep on rocking in the free world. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.